Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics. In this video, I'd like to discuss an article that's just appeared in the Brexit supporting paper, The Telegraph, in which the title, Project Fear Was Right All Along, is a savage tearing down of the economic decisions that Brexit inevitably led the government towards, and an acknowledgement of something that we in the anti-Brexit movement have been saying for a while. Brexit is basically the beast that devours its own children. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So it is true, isn't it? Brexit has eaten another one. Someone was pointing out recently, if I think over my lifetime, so in my lifetime, prime ministers, there was Harold Wilson, first of all. Then there was Callaghan. Then there was Thatcher, Major, Blair, Brown, David Cameron, all before Brexit. So, you had about 7 prime ministers before it all went loopy. And since then, we're not counting Cameron twice. So you've had Theresa May, Boris Johnson, Liz Truss. We're going to get another one before the end of the year by the sounds of it, maybe even before the end of the week, but certainly by the end of the year, you would think. So that'll have been 4 in about 6 years. 9 in about 40 years and 4 in about 6. And then there'll be another one at the next election as well. Let's be honest, there's going to be another one at the next election. It's just rapid. It's because the government can't survive. They can't survive Brexit, the madness of it, because it just keeps leading you into a dead end, and a government in a dead end soon gets booted out. And, I've not been able to discuss Brexit quite as much recently, so I may go off on one here a little bit. Sorry about that. The government basically set fire to our economy, you may have noticed. Then it had its own little meltdown. I say that in the past tense. It is actually still going on. But while Tory MPs carry out their little plots, it looks like I've got a bit of a window to catch up with an apparent change in public attitude. So obviously, an article in a Tory propaganda paper like The Telegraph isn't a reflection of public attitude. These papers exist to mould public attitude, not reflect it. But it can still be an indicator. The Telegraph is not the first pro-Brexit paper to produce an article pointing out the damage of Brexit. The Mail and the Express have actually been doing so almost since Brexit became a reality. I was doing at one point, for quite a long time, much longer than anticipated, a weekly thing on what the Brexit papers were saying this week. And yet, they're still pro-Brexit papers. The Telegraph, I strongly suspect, will continue to argue for Brexit still. So why do they produce articles which seem to acknowledge the damage? Why are they promoting the damage that Brexit's doing? Because they need to remain credible. In order to deceive someone, you have to begin from a point where the intended victim of the deception acknowledges a truth. You start off from something, oh yeah, that's true. And you have to do that to deceive someone. You say something, oh yeah, I understand that, yeah. Then you say something, oh, that's true. Then you say something else that they don't know is true, but they can go along with. And you just slowly steer them off course. So they have to acknowledge what the public can see is a clear problem with Brexit. Otherwise, nothing they say afterwards will be credible. If they're going to try and pretend that Brexit is delivering the promised bonanza, they may as well put on the tinfoil hat and tell us about the lizards secretly controlling us from their moon base. So once they've acknowledged the very obvious harm, then they can explain how it's not really Brexit actually, even though it is. It's just the way Brexit was implemented. If only someone with a bit more brain, a bit more competent was in charge, then it probably would have been fine. And this article's no different really. Its opening line is, call it revenge of the Remainer establishment if you like, as it goes on to explain that the Brexit promises have basically eaten themselves, which is itself sort of their version of the secret lizard moon base, isn't it? This idea of the Remainer establishment, the establishment being dead against Brexit. But what is this establishment? And if the establishment had been against Brexit, how come we left? They want to paint it as this great triumph of the people over the ruling classes. Oh, it's because we beat the establishment. Like a revolution. But a revolution isn't held on behalf of the people. It's formed by the people. Who led this so-called revolution? Privately educated spivs and investment bankers. Coordinated largely from within the Conservative Party. They've been in government most of the time since long before Napoleon was bouncing around Europe. You look at the architects of Brexit. You can't get much more establishment. But going back to this article, in truth, it doesn't actually talk about Brexit that much beyond the opening. It's really a crushing takedown of the past few weeks of economic misadventures by the government. But it does point out that this came as a result of the Brexit promises for a revolution in the British economy, which is true. Most Brexiteers didn't seriously suppose that just the act of leaving the EU would suddenly make us all richer. I mean, some did, like Jacob Rees-Mogg, who promised that a reduction in the cost of essentials would come from day one. But he's an idiot. If the Brexit campaign were left to people like him, we'd still be in the EU now. The more intelligent amongst them knew there had to be some sort of explanation. Their promise was these free market principles that they'd all been brought up to believe in at their posh, expensive private schools. Because all of the drivers of Brexit, even the leaders of the Lexiteers, were all privately educated. They've all grown up to believe a certain way of thinking. Even the left-wing ones who don't like the free market principles as such, they were all brought up to believe in something that means moving away from actual free trade. This extreme pyramid scheme was going to be the route to prosperity for all. But it faltered a little bit. They thought they were getting somewhere. The new Chancellor at the time, Rishi Sunak, he was getting, Mr. Furlow became popular as Mr. Furlow for a while. But remember, the first thing he did was tell all of his cabinet colleagues when he became Chancellor, get ready for spending cuts. Basically, he was all set to introduce another wave of austerity. They weren't calling it that, of course, but he was demanding a cut to all departmental budgets. That is literally the definition of austerity. But then COVID hit, and it was big spending time. Admittedly, much of that spending went on Tory mates and donors, rather than being focused on where it would do the most good, but it was still a big spending period of time. Then came the big taxes to pay for it all. But Johnson screwed it all up, losing safe Tory seats and polls making it clear he was going to lose the entire election. So they eased him out and got Liz Truss instead. Not exactly the plan most Tory MPs were going for, but those behind Brexit were delighted. Just over 3 weeks ago, the government announced full-on Brexit. Tax cuts, massive level of deregulation coming, the whole works. The Brexiteers couldn't believe it. Their promised land was finally here. We've done it. We've done it after all this time. Then the economy exploded. Kwarteng, their golden boy's gone now, and they're ruefully accepting that Truss is now Prime Minister in name only. That's how she's been referred to, and it's probably fair enough. She replaced her Chancellor with Jeremy Hunt. As staunch a Remainer as it's possible to be in the Tory party right now, and someone who immediately tore up Truss's mini-budget. The massive programme of deregulation would have crushed our economy even more as well. As I've explained in the past, if you lower your standards, then British producers, they don't get to compete more easily. They have a harder time because they've now got to demonstrate that their products still meet the higher standards for the market they're exporting to. That means much more paperwork. In other words, deregulation hurts your exports. This is the real anti-growth strategy. Now, I'm sure the Tories are going to go ahead with these deregulation plans because it's all sort of in the works now, because they're wedded to them now. They can't really go back on it without looking like they're going back on it. But it will be fudged. It'll surely be fudged now. Liz Truss, although she campaigned for Remain, turned into a proper little Brexit zealot. The Brexiteers couldn't fault her policies last month at all. They thought it was all marvellous. They're falling over themselves now to point out where she went wrong. But I saw what they were all saying last month and there wasn't a hint of criticism. In fact, they were loving the anguish which rejoiners would be experiencing very soon as Britain ended its new golden age and Truss won another massive majority at the next election. Now they're frantically trying to rewrite history again. Some of them are too lazy and they're just blaming Tory MPs instead. But this is a little tricky because when those MPs are acting to align themselves with their voters, you think, well, the only way they're able to pull it off is by suggesting that most Tory MPs actually seem to be left-wing Labour sympathisers. Okay, yeah, sure. I mean, yeah, admittedly, some MPs will not always do their parties any favours. You get that in all parties, don't you? The ones who just shoot their mouths off without any thought of what it's doing to their party. But the majority of them, not sure that makes sense. MPs who voted for voter suppression to make peaceful protest illegal, allow water companies to dump raw sewage into our rivers. The ones who voted to give nurses a real terms pay cut and then make them pay for parking at their place of work as well. Yeah, these are all left-wing, aren't they? Yeah, sure, of course they are. But that's where Brexit leads you every time. It doesn't work. It's not just that Brexit isn't better than the alternative. There are political ideas where you can actually make arguments for and against. This is why we have so many different socio-economic models preferred by different political parties. We have different political parties because they all have their own particular ideas. You know, because they've all got their pros and cons. They can all argue their case. And the difference between us is how we assess the net benefits of each one. You know, some of us think, well, this is the one that's the greatest net benefit. And this is the, you know, but Brexit doesn't have net benefits. And not only does it not have net benefits, it doesn't have benefits at all. I'm not being facetious. It's not one benefit. I mean, what have we been doing since we left the EU? Asking people to name one benefit to their lives as a result of leaving the EU. We're still waiting. No one has yet come up with one. Find an ordinary person. Just say to me, you support Brexit, do you? Yeah, I think it's great. Name me one way in which your life's better. Still waiting. Some people are trying a different tack now. They're saying, now that with an increasing number thinking we should rejoin the EU, they're saying, okay, so let's say we were to rejoin the EU. What freedoms would you miss being taken away then? Still waiting. We've still got to hear an answer for that one as well. Brexit isn't just something that doesn't benefit enough people, unless you're a low-down, dirty disaster capitalist. And there's only a few hundred of those, really, surely. It doesn't benefit anyone. Who does it benefit? So we're going to see the pro-Brexit media having to talk in fairly frank terms about the problems with Brexit before they then try and persuade their readers that the real problem is actually the people in charge. And it's actually not a difficult argument to make either, because you can say to people, actually, it's just because we've had idiots in charge. And we're going, yeah, we have had idiots in charge. And we're always going to have idiots in charge. Because that's another built-in feature of Brexit. You can't actually get astute leaders delivering a hard Brexit because it's a recipe for disaster. The only people who would even try would be those who are either pathologically deluded like Boris Johnson or terminally thick like Liz Truss. If the Tories do replace her with someone with a brain, they may well be Brexit believers, but they'll never deliver what those behind Brexit wanted. Say Sunak and Mordaunt, that's apparently the plot is to try and get those as like a double act. Now they're both genuine Brexiteers. Remember that Johnson and Truss both flipped their positions for reason of political advancement one way or the other. But Sunak and Mordaunt have never really changed their position on Brexit. But nor will they try and bring on what the Daily Mail called a few weeks ago a true Tory budget. They wouldn't dare. But there we are. Those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, please click the like button if you'd like to support the channel further, the join button for memberships, and until next time, I'll see you later.